obviously you've got this kid who's heading off to college, and they're 18 and therefore an adult, and you're supposed to allow them to become an adult, to become what they're going to be. So you stand there and you're waiting and you're thinking, what can I say? So there's my oldest son going off to college about 6 years ago, and I'm thinking, well, I can't tell him this, I can't tell him this, I can't tell him this. Then I realized, I looked at him and I said, just don't get yourself killed. I realized in the end that that was about all that I really had the ability to offer to him. So let me tell you this story. So, all right, there was this time that I wanted to be a doctor. Or at least I thought I wanted to be a doctor because everybody else around me wanted to be a doctor, so I figured I'd be one too. So we were walking off to this emergency medical training forum where we're going to learn all about becoming EMTs. And along the way, I saw this sort of flyer, and it was a flyer for becoming a carillonneur. I didn't really know what a carillonneur was, but as I read about it, I thought it had something to do with learning to play the bells. So while all my friends walked off to learn to become emergency medical technicians, I climbed up into the bell tower and met Mr. Bonhoeffer, who was a carillonneur for the university. And he said, sure, I'll teach you how to be a carillonneur. And so I started taking carillon lessons and ended up giving carillon recitals at churches in the South. All right, so I think that's always kind of funny when I think about it, because here I was right there on the path to doing exactly what I needed to do to be a doctor, and I saw some silly sign hanging up there. And the arbitrariness of that moment that led me to not spend time in an ambulance but to spend time in a bell tower, I think pretty much captures the real challenge that you have as a parent, and really believing that you have any ability to direct your child towards exactly the right path for what they want to do. I'm fairly certain that if my parents had known that I had made this choice, there would have been a rather deep sadness that had come over them. But it turned out. I think one of the things that I didn't appreciate about having an 18-year-old, even after having been 18 years old myself, and really in many cases after sending my two oldest kids off to college, was that developmentally there's this period of time, ages 18, 19, 20, 21, where the brains in your kids are still sorting themselves out. They're still figuring out how to be an adult. We've already gotten them way ahead of themselves with respect to what they can do intellectually. They did calculus when they were a sophomore in high school. You put any kind of test material in front of them and they'll cram it into their brain and they'll get an A. But then they show up in college and suddenly they realize that they have to wash their clothes and they don't have the foggiest notion how to do this. I know for my own kids, I think I was so protective of them that they weren't really sure which way to look to cross the street when they were in high school. The most common reason students come to my office is for me to tell them that everything is going to be okay. It's for them to say to me, I've just made a choice. Is it the right one? And it always cracks me up when I hear that. So I always say the same thing to them. I say, you know, let's go ahead and pretend we live in 100 parallel universes. And in each of these universes we make an arrow, and on the arrow we write down various features of a life that we might live. So here's the life in which I decide to become a dentist, and then I have 3 kids and 15 grandkids. Here's the one where I decide not to become a dentist. I decided to drop out of school, as a matter of fact, because I got pregnant. Here's the one where I decided to switch over and become a Russian literature major. And so you've got 100 of these things, and you fire them off into the air, and they land 50 years into the future. And then you walk by and you pick each of these arrows up and you look at it, and you ask questions like this. Which one made me happiest? Which one made me most content? Which one made me most powerful, most wealthy? Which one gave me the greatest sense of satisfaction? You realize that it's almost impossible to be able to make those kinds of predictions based upon the individual kinds of decisions that you might make early on. So when kids come into my office and I ask me about this, and I tell them this analogy to shooting an arrow 50 years into the future, I typically end up having them walk out thinking, I have no idea what this guy just talked about, but I'm fairly certain he didn't answer my question. And the reason is because there is no answer to be given. You cannot know whether the decisions that you make along the way are going to result in things turning out. For so many of our students, there's an expectation level coming from their parents that they will in fact achieve some success in a career. And there's no more obvious example of this than the notion that you're going to become somebody gets into a health profession school, into a medical school, a dental school, a pharmacy school, a vet school. Because after all, this is the way that we as parents feel like we've won. There's nothing better than to be able to be at a party and somebody says, well, tell me about your kid. And he says, oh yeah, he's at Baylor College of Medicine. And that's all you have to say. And then they go, ah, you were the best. So we all understand the value that comes in being able to just sort of drop the name of the professional school that your child got into. But what we don't appreciate is that it is entirely possible that that kid doesn't want to do this. I would bet that fully half the kids in the College of Natural Sciences right now don't want to be here. They are here not because they like math and science, not because they have any aspirations for careers that are built upon math and science, but because their parents want them to be. And there's nothing wrong on a certain level with having aspirations for your child, but there has to be the appreciation that at some point you have to let go and let them do what they're going to do. And really, if you think about it, think back to when you were 18. Think back and ask yourselves, what kind of input did I want or need from my parents at that time? The truth was that what you needed more than anything else was the opportunity to make a bucket load of mistakes. And that's what you were going to have to do. And all the guidance in the world that your parents could provide in the way of advice had to go in one ear and out the other, because that advice, along with the advice that they get from everybody else, is only going to contribute to the fact that ultimately your kids have to have their own experiences. They have to do it uniquely for themselves. So when you're watching your child struggle after their first exam, or you're watching your child struggle socially as they adjust to being at college, just appreciate that that's a good thing, that it is getting through that and coming out on the other side that's what is most important. Knowing that you're there, knowing that they have somebody that they can count on to talk to listen to them, that's about all you can hope for. The truth is that each of us comes to a place where we feel like we can engage the world around us at different times. Right now, I think I'm known for being a really good lecturer, for being able to stand in front of 500 students and give a rousing discussion on chemistry. But as an 18-year-old freshman, I was one of the lamest human beings who ever existed. I couldn't talk to another human being, much less talk to 500 people. So when you sit there and you watch a child evolve in terms of how they grow up emotionally, how they grow up intellectually, you have to appreciate that it comes to different people at different times. And it isn't always so nicely and neatly packaged into a 4-year college career. In my particular case, my blossoming, I think, took place around the age of 25 or so. It certainly didn't take place as an 18 or 19-year-old. So if you have a kid who doesn't seem to be getting it, that seems to struggle in this kind of way, that isn't realizing all the things that you'd like for them, do appreciate that it is a long life, and that maybe that year or two spent after college just lying on a couch or just working a menial job somewhere before going off and figuring out what to do next is a necessary part of what they need to do. You never know when that phone call will occur from that child of yours on the other side of finally growing up. I remember something that was pretty funny. I got a phone call from my oldest last January, and he was about 25 or so, and he calls and he says, "Dad, you know what today is?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Today is the 1-year anniversary of me asking you for money. I have gone a year without asking you for money." Now, to me, it was actually kind of good because I realized he hadn't asked for it in a while, but the more important thing for me to appreciate about it was that he had finally grown up, and he was proud of it. He didn't need to talk to me about it. He knew it inside. He knew that every time he called and asked for money, it was another example of the fact that he hadn't quite gotten there yet. I think all of our kids are like that. They all know inside the things that they never say out loud. They all know inside that what they aspire to is to one day be able to look at themselves in a mirror and say, I've made it. I'm actually an adult now. Now, when it is they get there is so very much dependent upon who they are as a person and the kinds of experiences they have to have. And it's our job as parents to just be patient and to sit back and to love and to wait.